and welcome back to my channel. I've got lots to get through, and I know some of you have requested videos. I think one of you on dating, and then another one of you on love on the spectrum. All of this is going to take me a little while to get through, so I've got a massive backlog of videos I need to do, and I also want to respond to your comments at some point. It's just time. I will get around to it, so it just might take me a while, I'm just saying. As much as I'd love to get through it all, there's just no way I can straight away, but I do intend to. But first of all, I would actually like to review a book I've read recently called Empire of Normality. Hope you can see that. Empire of Normality, and it's by Robert Chapman, Neurodiversity and Capitalism. Yeah, if you've seen my other videos, you will know my own views on the neurodiversity movement and how I'm highly critical of the movement, and I've talked about this at length in other videos, and I've also mentioned how there are many different strands to neurodiversity, and it's actually not one movement. So this book is written from a Marxist perspective, an anti-capitalist sort of communist perspective on the neurodiversity movement, and because it comes at it from a kind of left-wing angle, it obviously resonates more with me than the more kind of liberal, neoliberal versions of the neurodiversity paradigm. So, because I am, after all, I am a socialist, so, yeah. So as I was reading through this book, obviously a lot of the ideas in here I could agree with and support, but at the same time, because I'm critical of the neurodiversity paradigm, and particularly the extreme social model, there was a lot in here that I was also highly critical of, and that just didn't tally with my own experience. So it's kind of a mixture of, yes, I could support aspects of it, and yes, this tallies with my own perspective and my own politics, but then there are other parts to the book which I didn't agree with. So yeah, so what I'm going to do is, this is going to take quite a number of videos. I'm not going to be able to do it all today because there's loads I want to get through. I'm basically I took loads of notes, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the notes I made and then kind of add little bits where and when, my own sort of thoughts on the matter when it comes up. So that's what I'm going to do. So that's the book. It was a very interesting read, I have to say, despite the fact that I'm critical of the neurodiversity movement. It was nonetheless a very interesting read. And I think Chapman is obviously a lot more on the same page as me than some other people in the neurodiversity movement. You know, I'm sure there's a lot we do agree on. It's just that obviously I'm critical of the paradigm. Even though I could agree with him in some points, others I disagreed with. So let's get on with it. Well, I'll just put that there. Okay, so Empire of Normality. So essentially, the book says that both for systems and ideas the neurodiversity movement arose to fight against, and the movement itself, are products of the global north. Okay, so it's highly situated. The neurodiversity movement is highly situated in the global north. The book goes on to say that neurological domination, what Chapman calls disablement, became pervasive under capitalism. That's the kind of key sort of assumption, argument made in the book, is that neurological domination became pervasive in capitalism more than in any other system, more than in feudalism, more than in slave-owning societies, that it was under capitalism that what he calls the Empire of Normality became kind of systematic. I actually disagree. I do feel that's rather simplistic, which I will talk about later. I have studied history, and because I did history when I was at university, and I just don't see how. What I'm trying to say is, I don't think capitalism itself, per se, is any more oppressive, if you like, for disabled people than other systems. I mean, there are many things under capitalism have actually got better for disabled people. I'm an anti-capitalist, okay? I'm highly critical of capitalism. I'm anti-capitalist. I'm a socialist. But I'm just saying that but capitalism is infinitely better than previous systems in many ways for disabled people. Certainly later stages of capitalism, not really so much the industrial period, but later stages have been obviously seen a lot of progressive things come into place that just wouldn't have been possible in earlier societies. So I think that's rather simplistic. He calls it disablement. This idea that essentially it's society that disables as opposed to something innate in a person. And I think, again, that's too simplistic. I take the biopsychosocial model, which I won't go into now. But anyway, moving on. So he says that placing neurodiversity theory within... He's placing neurodiversity theory within anti-capitalist struggles, okay? So as I say, his book is a Marxist perspective, it's coming out from Marxism. To develop a historical neurodivergent consciousness. So he wants to basically, it's kind of like a rallying cry, to develop a kind of neurodivergent consciousness, a bit like sort of class consciousness or feminist consciousness raising for women. It's a sort of similar thing. He wants to raise neurodivergent consciousness here against the dominant order, to kind of get people to kind of realise their oppressions, you know, and then to be able to then like resist against it. So he gives a little bit about his own background. So he's an autistic person, okay? Chapman is autistic but late diagnosed. He grew up poor and homeless, and then he was in foster care. He grew up in 1990s in London in the UK. Later on, he was drawn to studying philosophy, and he got diagnosed autistic around the sort of same time. And then he discovered the neurodiversity movement. He discovered neurodiversity, which was very sort of influential for him, and he became an advocate of neurodiversity. And then so the book provides a bit of background around the neurodiversity movement. That the movement emerged in autistic activist groups during the 1990s, back when he was still a child. So he must be a sort of similar generation to me. I'm not sure of his exact age. Similar sort of generation anyway. And so back in the 1990s, autistics began connecting online for the first time. This was back in the time when, you know, people were beginning to have their own personal computers and the internet was becoming a thing. And they began connecting online for the first time. And there's a lot of consciousness raising that challenged the dominant understanding of autism, and that argues that the problems experienced by autistic people have less to do with the brain being broken and more to do with the societal failure to accommodate differences. Obviously, brains being broken is a very loaded term. I wouldn't put it quite like that, but as you know, I think it's just simplistic to say that it's all society. I'm not ignoring at the fact that society makes life a hell of a lot harder, and I'm all for, you know, fighting against the system and oppressive capitalist practices. You know, I'm all for that, don't get me wrong, but I just think it's highly simplistic to make it out that the main problem is that it's a kind of a mixture of different things, but I feel that for different people it will vary as to how much it's society vis-a-vis their own what's going on inside them. It's very complex, and just saying it's all society is just, I feel, quite naive. So the early advocates argued there's a need for behaviours of atypical people to be accepted and supported, rather than framed as medical pathologies to be controlled or cured. And then out of this came the idea of neurodiversity, which was first documented by sociology student Judy Singer, and the basic point was that we should reject the very idea of a normal brain as an ideal. Normality was not assumed to be superior to divergence, and that there were many kinds of minds, each enabled or disabled in different environments, and no single one is naturally superior to all the others. So they're very loaded terms, you know, like superior, normal, and so on. And I disagree with the whole idea that I feel that disability here is being rather relativised. Like, yes, people are disadvantaged in different environments, but disability itself is quite different, and I feel that kind of relativising it and implying that every single person at some point in time is disabled kind of in a way trivialises real disability, like what people like me face. So I disagree with that. I find that a little bit offensive, because I feel it kind of trivialises like actual real disability, which of course every person can experience at some point in time, you know. Just because someone isn't disabled right now, they could become disabled. Anyone can become disabled at any time. Lots of people are becoming disabled now because of long COVID, for example. That's a disability. But I feel like I feel that disability is quite an extreme situation, and just saying that everyone becomes disabled when they're in a certain environment, I feel trivialises the whole nature of actual disability, personally. So he talks a bit about how his sensory problems, which he sees as caused by a sort of biased design of schools and public spaces. So he sees his sensory problems as very much caused by society. And he talks about how the neurodiversity movement is a new movement modelled on earlier civil rights movements. And then he talks about someone called, I can't pronounce his name, Cassian Asasumasu's coining of neurodivergent, okay? So that was coined by someone, I can't pronounce the name, it's quite a hard name. Someone called Cassian Asasumasu coined the word neurodivergent in the early 2000s. And this meant any kind of neurological functioning that was considered divergent from typical, where the mere differences are disabled by an unaccommodated society, or medical conditions such as epilepsy. I'd argue that autism is a medical condition as well. Well, certainly it can be. And I don't think it's all caused by society, but anyway. And then he mentioned someone called Steve Graby, who argued that while anti-psychiatry emphasised that people with neurological divergences, or whatever you want to call it, were unlike people with bodily disabilities. So in other words, psychiatrised people not really disabled. The neurodiversity perspective embraced a disabled identity. So this is interesting, and I talked about this before in one of my other videos, how, you know, like how some very kind of there's a sort of fringe group in the neurodiversity movement these days that denies autism as a disability, but the actual early advocates were very keen to stress that autism and other related conditions are disabilities. They never shied away from the word disability, they emphasised it's a disability, they wanted to connect with the wider disability rights movement. It's just that they saw disability as very much a socially caused, and they very much emphasised the social model, but they did not shy away from the fact that autism is a disability. Again, he mentions an autistic scholar called Nick Walker. That's a woman, by the way. First I wasn't sure, but it is actually a woman. An autistic scholar called Nick Walker proposed neurodiversity liberation required a mass scientific and cultural paradigm shift away from the dominant pathology paradigm. She argued for a neurodiversity paradigm instead, and that was in 2011. And this offered a different path to both the pathology paradigm framing and anti-psychiatry denialists. So Chapman makes it very clear in the book that he's very against anti-psychiatry, because anti-psychiatry tends to deny mental illness, it denies mental disability, it calls mental illness a myth. He's very against anti-psychiatry because he sees, you know, the disability is real, mental illness is real, but he's also against the pathology paradigm. Well, I'm going to move over to video number 2 now to carry on. So moving over to video number 2.